So today we have an old friend, Umur Cubukcu, co-founder of Ubicloud, which you can find at ubicloud.com. Taglines are open source alternative to AWS. And Ubicloud provides cloud services on bare metal providers such as AWS, and you can set it up yourself or you use their managed service. And with that, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here.
All right, so let's start with this concept called open cloud.
Yeah.
So what are the key principles or key features that makes a cloud open in your mind?
Yeah. So here's the thing, Ben. The cloud has been around forever, it feels like, although, it's maybe about 15 years. So it's old, but it's new in a sense, but it's indispensable, right? And what has happened, we've all kind of seen this ourselves, kind of built our careers on it, but it's evolved into kind of a closed ecosystem where you have the large hyperscalers. You got AWS, Azure, GCP, and then you got here state side, and then you got the Chinese clouds like Alibaba's, etc. of the world. There is some kind of a lot of activity in Europe, but not as kind of prominent a player on either side, if you will. But these are closed ecosystems. There's a lot of open source software that runs on them, obviously, like Postgres, like many other databases and technologies, but the cloud itself is closed source. The control plane, all the orchestration, that gets done. And when you think about what the cloud is, actually, it's like an admin panel. It's a management tool, if you will, to orchestrate and manage your resources. So it's actually an app that runs. And we know from life that every major category of software has an open source equivalent. You've got Oracle, you got in databases, you got Postgres, you got Windows, you got Linux and operating systems. And then the cloud operating system isn't quite. And so that's how we kind of set out on the, like Ubicloud. When we say an open source cloud, we mean everything from the bare metal up to the services that you get are open source.
So everything. So the key characteristic of an open cloud is, so what are the bare minimum components that should be open source?
So the way I look at it is the input to the system is a bare metal machine with internet access. The output of it is, cloud services. You can click, you can get a VM, on a demand, or you can get a, Postgres on demand. You get your Kubernetes, your networking, all of those. So that's the output. That's the cloud, if you will. The software that makes that happen, which we call kind of the control plane, which is the Ubicloud. Every vendor has a version of that, regardless of what they call it. But essentially, that control plane should be open. That's to answer your question.
Okay. So it doesn't mean does it mean that I guess at a higher level components like the storage layer, the S3, or the compute, the EC2, they don't have to be open?
Not so.
In your definition,
the more the merrier. At a minimal perspective, that control plane needs to be open, and what that manages directly. For example, in the case of Ubicloud, take the VMs. You take bare metal. You have a hypervisor that then does the virtualization. You have the operating system on top of it. Then you have that. In the case of Ubicloud, everything is open. Like we use, what makes this possible is, of course, we're not single-handedly doing this. For example, we use like the cloud, a hypervisor as an open source project to do that. We use Linux as the operating system and so forth. But the reason I think to answer, the more of those components are open source. So when we do the managed database with Postgres, again, everything is open. Same thing with our compute, with our networking. So in our case, that's true. I think what makes the biggest difference, the why, it's not just for the sake of open source that we're doing this. There is a transparency to it. So whoever is managing your data and your kind of resources ultimately has access to all of it. They can be governed by terms and conditions. There is, there's of course laws, regulations, all of those kind of apply, but fundamentally the control plane, has access, right? And when you do that in a kind of an open source way, that transparency, and in order to make it work, the simplicity of it makes it much more clear what we're doing. So we're not hiding any cards. Everything is open. That's one part of it. So transparency. The other part of it is the portability of it. So now I can take this, software, and I can run it kind of in any environment that I like. So that could be my private cloud, private metal. I could be a large enterprise and I have, all this metal that's running, and I can, manage this with the same Ubicloud control plane as that control plane governing my resources on AWS, for example. So I get a homogeneous, I click, and how I get Postgres is the same, whether it's running on my metal or on AWS's metal, or like we use Hetzner, we use other kind of cloud providers out of Europe and elsewhere. So your experience as a user is the same, and all the data is encrypted, kind of like addressed, like in transit. You've got your all your private networking, your components are kind of all there. And the terminology we use, we say, okay, control plane is Ubicloud, this open source software that kind of governs everything and orchestrates everything. Where your data sits is the data plane, right? So your data plane could be Ben's machine. Like you could install Ubicloud kind of on your laptop, and then you could say, hey, Ubicloud control plane, access that and manage it for me. And then you can do that. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to self-host Ubicloud. It's an open source software. I can see what it does. I'm going to download it, and then I'm going to actually use it to run my own cloud. Now, in practice, for a lot of companies or like entities, like startups, a lot of companies, using it as a service is the easiest thing to do. Right, so the software is there, but we do we offer it as a managed service.
But I thought that for people who are not super deep and hands-on into cloud, cloud, they're just users, right? So the typical impression that people have is the reason we're stuck is obviously because we're using some of these managed services.
Yeah.
But also because of storage. The data is in S3. To move it to whatever storage system there is in Azure or GCP. Is gonna it seems like storage is also
that's true.
So what's your take on storage being open source or open file or open format?
Yeah, that's a big component of the lock-in or the the movement of there is just the sheer amount of data that you need to move. That's a barrier. And then
the API as well. The API.
There's also the egress fees that the hyperscalers kind of put. So getting data in, no problem, zero cost. Getting data out, you'll pay.
So what is the open cloud manifesto around storage?
So that is, we don't charge for egress. Beyond.
No, but I mean in terms of what level of open.
What it looks, So right now what we have.
So set aside Umur what you guys do, but what is what would be the manifesto around storage?
Perfect.
What level of openness should storage have?
The data formats would be open, although an object store's duty is to preserve and replicate the data. So you could store. What you store there doesn't have to be open source, right? Like you could store Parquet files, you could store binaries, etc. So that's not our prerogative. But how we do that, the stack would be portable. So you could run it yourself if you wanted to in your data center as a kind of manifesto, or, and it would be transparent. So you see exactly kind of those principles apply to, how open source storage happens. Now, from the practicality of it, having what we do today in terms of kind of on our way to getting there. We have an internal open source storage component, so object store. We use Minio, right? And other products like that. So we kind of use them in the back end. We don't expose that as a S3 service to the end customer. What do we use it for? We store our kind of images, we store our Postgres backups is key. So we have a very robust Postgres managed service, which I'll be happy to talk about later on. But whenever you're writing data to there, it gets automatically backed up. Where does it get backed up to, right? And so so that's what we use our internal cluster for. So the principle there is that stack should be portable. That can run anywhere. It's accessible. It's your data. You can take it out anytime. You have total control over that data, right? So by that I mean access to it, and I mean the ownership of it. Like both of those are true. That you can store it in Europe, you can store it in your data center, you can store it, you can say, hey, Ubicloud, store it for me, and we'll replicate it, like n ways. So that's basically what the storage layer would look like. For standard, we're going to have
So to tie the bow on this topic, the Open Cloud Manifesto would say the control plane should be as open source as possible.
It should be open source. Yeah, control plane should be open source. Yeah.
And then what is the manifesto around storage? I'm still not clear.
The manifesto around storage is it should it should not force lock-in, meaning it should be portable. It should be able to be run anywhere that you like. It shouldn't charge you egress fees for just like moving the data out. There's always the cost of moving data, the network cost. That's charged as needed, but that cost is about 90 to like almost 100x lower than what hyperscalers actually charge for. So the cost base is, doing that minimally, not as a barrier to lock in, but as a way of maintaining the service. I think that's part of the no lock-in philosophy. So I think the open source storage aspect, the product that's closest to it in philosophy, that's adopted at scale, but without the open source part, is probably R2, right? Like when you think about Cloudflare's R2, where it's close, like the actual binaries are closed source. But when you have access to R2, you don't, pay for egress fees. You can take your data, you can move it around, freely, pretty much. And today, in fact, that's the most popular solution for Ubicloud customers, is if you use our managed service and you need to store data, you'll store it typically on R2 bucket, or like R2, and then you'll bring it to Ubicloud to do some compute. Let's say you're running like a bunch of VMs, you're running as a data scientist, maybe you're running a bunch of transformations on the data to get it ready before a training run on a GPU, or running some, you're going to run some image models and you're going to clean up the edges and you've got some algorithms. Whatever is your compute job to be done is, then you spin up these Ubicloud instances, you bring your data from R2, you do all, let's say you bring 50 terabytes of data, you process it over the course of 2-3 weeks, you run batch jobs, it could be shorter, longer, doesn't matter. And then the output is, let's say 10 terabytes, you write that back to R2. And then from there, you can take it to any GPU you like to process, or back to your, wherever that data needs to be. So we're very agnostic on, we're very non-imperial. Maybe that's a good word to, from an open source, cloud philosophy, it's very non-imperial. You're not here to kind of grab as much of your data as possible and then lock you in that way. Our way of winning is, we do few services, we do them very high quality. So, you're not, if you hundreds of AWS services or other services, you're not going to get them on Ubicloud. It's explicitly a non-goal. But the core services around VM, compute, databases, networking, you get them. Get them very reliably, very transparently, and at an unbeatable cost. So, so the way we win is, hey, the cloud margins have gotten pretty crazy, over the networking is one part of it, compute is another part, but the cost of actually bare metal, what you need to provide this service has been steadily falling over the last 10 plus years, steadily. But the cloud prices, in the early days, you'd see Amazon price drops, right? Regularly, those have kind of stopped. And it's basically like an oligopoly, where the prices are pretty much all about the same between the hyperscalers. The cost of hardware is falling, so the margins are increasing. But each of these entities are, financially speaking, $1 trillion valuations and have different kind of behemoths at this stage. Whereas for an actual user, the cost of providing the service, when we get CPUs, we get them from AMD. We get the latest EPYC, 9 series machines. So it's the same. In fact, in many cases, it's better. We get NVMe disks. It's the same disks. It's in fact better because they are newer. And then the cost is about a third. right? So then that becomes our sort of transparency, and by cutting through all this, both the bureaucracy and the path dependency, because we are starting, we haven't started 15 years ago, right? Like we started recently. Then we can afford to be kind of more direct and more minimal, and that's how we win. So customers come to us because they get like an open, reliable product at an unbeatable price and unbeatable performance. They get the freedom from a manifesto perspective to like own their data, move their data, run it wherever they like. They get sovereignty, and control over the data. So this value prop can apply to larger entities. Like if I'm a bank, if I need to run my data, like my choices of, hey, do I send all of this to a hyperscaler or do I keep everything on-prem? And then on one side, I'm stuck in VMware world or Broadcom rather. In the other, I'm kind of at the hyperscalers, but I actually want something that's, that's more robust. That gives me the flexibility to move. That's where, for example, like Ubicloud fits in. And yeah.
So actually, let me take a step back for a second here. So
Sure.
obviously you're a serial entrepreneur. Last startup was around Postgres. Then you went into Y Combinator as a partner for a few years.
Yep.
And then of all the things you can start, so you chose
Wow.
this open cloud.
Yes.
But then when I first looked at it, I go, okay, that makes sense. Because my thinking was, okay, so he's doing kind of a neo cloud, kind of one of these neo clouds around AI.
Yeah.
AI compute, right? So like a Lambda or whatever, right? So Lambda
Right.
Labs
Right.
or so focus on AI workload. But no, it seems like you decided to start an open cloud that's more general
Yep.
and then not necessarily just focus on helping AI, because a lot of the investment in cloud right now is in AI.
Is in AI. Yeah.
And so it's counterintuitive in two ways. One, it's open, and then secondly, that it's not hyper focused on AI, but you
Right.
obviously
Right.
can use it for AI. So
Yeah.
so explain those two choices from an entrepreneurial perspective.
Really happy to. And so, and of course, like I'll touch on AI because it's impossible not to, like in more detail, like how we tackle that. But the way, maybe to your point, even though Ubicloud is about 2 years old, the history behind it is a lot longer. To your point, so we started a company with the same people. My co-founder, kind of Özgün here, we were also co-founder at Citus Data, and which we started around 2011, and we built that as a distributed Postgres company. We grew to very large enterprises like Bloomberg's and Cisco's of the world. We sold it to a lot of startups, including like the Cloudflares or a lot of the SaaS companies at the time, and then got acquired by Microsoft. And then after the acquisition in 2019, I ran the Postgres product within Azure. My co-founder ran the engineering side of it. And then we did that for like the years we were there. It was the kind of the fastest growing kind of like Azure products there. And of course, the wind towards the cloud is very apparent. The wind towards Postgres and open source is very apparent. And we'd like to think can take only kind of some small amount of credit in terms of, hey, like the actual product experience was good. So all of it kind of added up, and now the Postgres team continues to thrive, at Microsoft, which of course I'm very happy about. But stepping kind of from there, one of the observations we've had while at Microsoft is, hey, that like enterprises, which is the bread and butter of Azure, have the same kind of dilemma, which is you have a binary choice. You either are running kind of on-prem and you're unhappy with that, and everybody tells you to go to the cloud, which there's a lot of merit to doing, and then like literally tens of billions spent in marketing just to to get that message, and which is very mainstream. But then once you move that, then you lose control over the stack, and then that and a lot of companies don't actually like that false choice or practical choice, but there is not much to do about it. And then you've got on the non-enterprise side, you got smaller clouds, by no means small, by the way, but smaller clouds. Take like a DigitalOcean, for example, right? Like these are products have been around for a while, but there is almost no reason for an enterprise to use such a product. Like, while then you have the other three hyperscalers, why would you use that? And that creates a different type of challenge, for that kind of segment of the product. So seeing all of that, we said, hey, in fact, we could, and then the other observation is, hey, from the locality of these hyperscalers, you have the US, you have China, but there is a big gap elsewhere in the world. And there are, like many countries have regulations around data residency and et cetera. And this is even pre the current geopolitical tensions that we are.
Now there's a big push in Europe for sovereignty, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now that's kind of even much more like pronounced. So we said, okay, like we can tackle this landscape with an open source cloud, right? An open source cloud. Why do that? It basically provide kind of these core services without the AI kind of in full swing at the time, right? Of us, founding, like Ubicloud. And our third co-founder, Daniel, is one of he worked with us while we were at Citus, and he's one of the core people who wrote Heroku Postgres, for example, which is the earliest managed Postgres products in the world, next to RDS Postgres, right? And so we come from like these mission critical systems, from like running them at scale, like in the cloud, and we see a very acute need to have that kind of portability around those services. Postgres is a strength for us. So we start, what's the minimal thing we need to provide the Postgres service? You need compute, right? Like you need some amount of like you have basically a DNS service.
So your thesis from the beginning was portability is a big market.
Portability and the economics of it, the two of them together. Yeah, like the portability as it relates to the control aspect, like the dependence of it, and the cost. Both are can be tackled together.
But then to actually start a company, you had to have some sort of data or opinion or anecdotal data, at least, that hey, at least the people who will pay enterprise, this portability is a big deal for them.
Yes. And I think what we see is twofold. So one, like today, Ubicloud has more than 500 customers, right, over the time, and many of them are startups, but there are also enterprises involved. Some are in production, others are kicking the tires, but kicking them fairly hard. And today we basically have spin more than 1 million VMs every week. So the product has matured. These are customer VMs that we spun short-lived, often like for CI purposes or others, but the machinery, the software that powers this is like under a lot of production.
And if you were to survey them, what would be the top 2 to 3 reasons they chose you?
They are different for the enterprise and the startup. For the startups, it is really about cost, right? So I am, why pay Amazon $20,000 when I can get this done with like $7,000? And I'm faster. So it's not a marketing pitch. Like you run the same job, just completes faster on newer machines. You're done. Like it's more delightful, right? And then you got kind of APIs, but it's a programmable cloud. You don't pick up the phone, call us, and we'll give you some machine out of some data center. Like it's just what you expect. You go in, you make an API call, or you click something, and you get it. Like it's a cloud, and it's the cost is the price performance is the appeal for the startup. They run out of of course, that lower end of the market, like AWS will throw a lot of credits right, and then you're using them. But I think there's also more and more.
By the way, the credits are just to get you on board. And
exactly.
The credits run out.
Exactly, and then when they run out,
you're locked in. Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And so companies are more and more savvy around this. Yeah. Partly because they've been, others have been burned or they've been burned themselves. And then partly because now, I have credits across multiple, providers. So maybe I shouldn't be too deep in any one of them. So they build their stack with portability in mind, right? So they're not using 48 different services on Amazon. They're using and then when the credits expire, they can go to a different service. And then with that in mind, then maybe Ubicloud is a very good destination to land. And in fact, we're seeing that. We're seeing companies who build
for startups, it's cost. So for enterprise?
Cost. Yes, for the enterprise, it's control. I have my data running, for example, regulated industries and primarily banking. You could add healthcare and telco to that as well. But ones we work with are kind of like mostly banks. Also, we have some like large retail customers, like with like billions in revenue. They are in the earlier phases, I would say, of okay, let's try Ubicloud. Does this thing really do what it tells it does? And I can always spike to the cloud if I wanted to, because there's a Ubicloud managed service, right? But I can also run it myself. And if I run it myself, then it's part of my own kind of networking and my security posture, and it kind of overflows. So they are so within that world, like the privacy of the data is a key aspect, and the control over that.
But then at this point, all the clouds must have an answer to both privacy and control. If their sales engineers and sales people
Their
must
sales
have,
teams,
yeah.
their sales teams do. The
Yeah.
actual products, like for example, AWS has Outpost, right? And that's been a product that's been around like for like quite a long time. The reality of it is different because you are it's an afterthought from, okay, I've got AWS, and then the incentives of those teams generally, I know it from like internal conversations, aren't fully aligned with the overall like the company, which is okay, like you're telling everybody to come to the kind of the public cloud, but then you got to run a miniaturized version of that kind of on some premise, but there's so much complexity on the main line that like a lot of dependency between all these projects that you're doing that, whereas we are doing it from scratch with that mindset. So the Ubicloud product is very compact, and what it does on bare metal, and then it goes and does that on kind of AWS, for example, right? And I'll give a very a compelling use case that people use us for. I mentioned Postgres. What we do is we run Ubicloud Postgres on-prem on these bare metal machines that we provide, or on AWS. Now, if you have you use us as opposed to, of course, Amazon has RDS, the managed Postgres service now, but we're running on NVMe disks, local disks that EC2 provides us, right? And we don't give you necessarily a cost advantage there because we have to buy the hardware we rent it from AWS. We can't beat them on cost, but we can, and we very much do beat them on performance because we are running things locally on NVMe disks on the latest, as opposed to
and this is true even if, let's say I'm on AWS.
Yep.
And I'm interested in Postgres.
Yep.
Reality is there's also other startups that are Postgres startups running on AWS.
That's
so
right.
Even if, so I guess if I use those startups, one, they might be actually more expensive because obviously they have to make money, right?
Yep.
But on the other hand, they could be faster because they specialize in Postgres.
Well, with Postgres and with Ubicloud.
So I'm not going to name check these startups, but I guess timescale is one of them.
Yeah. That's so. With Postgres, I won't be humble in that department because we spent pretty much our careers on Postgres, like the last 15 years pretty much. So I'd say probably the best service and the best speed that you're going to get on AWS will actually be on Ubicloud.
Or even if you're not, it's comparable, and then you have the portability.
Correct. And then even on that, for example, on the speed side, and we recently, just last week actually, announced a partnership with ClickHouse, for example.
Right.
And ClickHouse has, of course, a very robust and popular managed ClickHouse service for their analytics data store. A lot of people want to do transactions with it. So a very natural match is I want to use Postgres. And then what we've done is have a very kind of a strategic partnership with the ClickHouse team, whereby ClickHouse Postgres is a service provided by the ClickHouse team, but it's powered by the Ubicloud Postgres product. So the portability here is how it matters is we take the Ubicloud open source, that control plane that I described, and an instance of it is run by the ClickHouse team to service their customers, right? So then they get this super fast, I will actually say the fastest Postgres that you can get.
So in that instance, the fact that you're an open cloud is not even part of the decision-making process. It's just that you're fast Postgres.
For ClickHouse's customers, yes. For ClickHouse itself, it is very much a criteria, and for us, it's a very much criteria because then now we're doing code development with the ClickHouse team. So the ClickHouse's Postgres
I
team,
see.
like when they need to improve something on the product, they improve it upstream, kind of in the Ubicloud, project, right? So there's a lot of ClickHouse contributors to the Ubicloud project, the open source project I'm talking about, and then so the fact that it's open source now allows for us to build an ecosystem, which benefits everyone in the ecosystem. So that means, ClickHouse customers benefit in this case. They get, every day their Postgres gets better. All Ubicloud customers who use Ubicloud, get a better Postgres. And overall, the Ubicloud, project adds more and more, weight and momentum behind it. So it is an ecosystem. And the fact that it's an open source matters, in that sense. But to your point, if I'm a ClickHouse customer who needs to use Postgres, my primary selling points are: this is super fast. It integrates very nicely with my ClickHouse existing setup already on kind of AWS, right? And then I have a unified kind of query, across those layers. The data can move with real-time CDC and so forth. So the value prop to them doesn't revolve around ClickHouse. It doesn't revolve around open source, although to some it does, but at large. And then for us, it is very much about open source, that kind of building that ecosystem.
So what's your 2 to 3 sentence description or elevator pitch around data gravity and egress fees?
Don't pay them.
No, but is it this in terms of open cloud in general and Ubicloud specifically? What would be the...
What I'd say is for your data, store it on R2 if you can, as opposed to S3, for portability of data, so that you can move it, not just to Ubicloud. So this isn't a self-interested, although there is of course a self-interest in it, but it's not just that. There is so you can move it elsewhere. Like you're going to process this data across different GPUs.
And in the Umur, is this I guess a standard practice now? No.
Industry-wide, no. For some companies, yes. It is a pattern among, for example, a lot of our customers.
How come it's not a standard practice? Marketing? Is it marketing?
Partly marketing, I think partly path dependency, right? Like you started on AWS, your data is already there, so you're not. And then of course, Cloudflare was an early Citus customer, so we have that team.
So you folks need to write a few articles around these are standard practices.
That's fair. Yeah. That's okay. Here's how you think about, or how.
Oh, these are the kinds of things that if you do it early, you will not regret it.
That's a very fair point. Yeah.
Forward, right?
Yeah.
So for both startups and enterprise, based on what you've said so far, I assume, at least for now, the current situation in Ubicloud, the largest usage revolves around Postgres, correct?
That's correct. So Postgres is very popular. So we got 4 services primarily. We've got Postgres, or 5, I should say, because this compute has so we got Postgres, we got compute, like VMs, we got Kubernetes, managed Kubernetes. We got GitHub runners, managed GitHub runners, which runs, of course, on the compute. And it's a very simple one-line integration, where if you're running GitHub Actions, and then you have a YAML file, a configuration that says it runs on Ubuntu standard instances. You just change that one line to runs on Ubicloud, and now your CI runners exstantiate on Ubicloud as opposed to on Azure. Why do you do that? One, it's literally 10x lower cost, so you save about 90%, or using our faster runner, you save about 80%. So it's 5x lower price. And it's faster. It actually runs on newer generation hardware. So it's almost like you make one line change on your runners. If you're using GitHub Actions, you say runs on literally a one line change on Ubicloud. And now you get faster. Your builds are faster and cheaper. So that's one quick adoption. Then you've got when you're on Ubicloud, you got your Postgres, which runs both on Ubicloud instances that we rent, and it also runs on AWS. So that's very popular. And then there is AI as a chapter.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I don't want to be in a situation where, okay, so I have Ubicloud for Postgres, and then I have another cloud for AI.
Yeah, exactly. So here's how people often do it. Hey, if you're using Ubicloud Postgres, then you can run that on Amazon, and you can do everything else on Amazon. That's fine. Like, we'll come to where you are, right? You're storing that data. You just get a faster Postgres. How much faster? Could be 8x, 9x, could be 4x, 5x.
But then don't you end up competing? So you get perceived as your Postgres.
There we're competing squarely with the.
But you're not. So your whole company tagline is around open cloud.
Yes, open. Yeah. So I mean, there in that context, we are competing on the Postgres dimension. But because of we can't say the same, for example, for MySQL, but for Postgres, we are a team that's basically built that for a very long time. So you get really, in my very biased opinion, but also to others, like the best Postgres service you can get on AWS. So you do that. Now, if you like what you're seeing, and you don't have now you're in the path dependency, but if you can afford to move your, data and your app elsewhere, some companies are too entrenched in AWS to do that, others are not, then you can take it out and run the whole thing on Ubicloud. But I'll put a pause on that for a sec, because AI becomes a very, very relevant workload. I mean, it is a very relevant workload, but the way it works is, by nature, a lot of AI workloads are more decoupled. Not entirely, but your GPUs are decoupled. You could run inference, you could anywhere. B, you got agentic workloads, and it does have some compute. There could be sandbox environments. It could be just, like standard compute running. It might not necessarily have to be on AWS. If you're taking a prompt and generating an app.
But I want to run it on a cloud where I know there's either scripts or packages that have all pre-installed, have all of the open source AI tools that I normally use.
Well, that you can do. That you can do with Ubicloud. So you can bring, you have a VM, right? And then
but then that Ubicloud is not compute starved. So in other words, how all these neoclouds brag about how much GPUs they have, and
yeah. We are not a
it's not for training. I'm not going to use it for training, but even for inference, I may need compute, right?
Yeah, now there's GPU compute and CPU. So from a GPU perspective, we have,
So you can work with bare metal clouds, like you said, so you can take advantage of what they have.
Yes. So
but then on your managed cloud, that's more optimized right now, honestly, for CPUs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what happens is, for example, there's a low cost, very high performance provider out of Germany called Hetzner. Right, so they rent bare metal machines. What we do is we'll rent the machine from them as a bare metal. We'll install Ubicloud, and then we'll make it available. And so we don't, actually buy the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So from an end user perspective, they are getting an unbeatable price performance, on that host, which is virtualized, right? And then you can get as many of those VMs as you like, and run your jobs. You can run your Postgres there, in the same kind of environment. And what that does for a lot of AI workloads is it really lowers your cost, because you're not beholden. You don't need to run your agents on AWS. For some jobs you might, right? But in many cases, you need the core CPU compute. Your GPU could be Lambda or AWS, doesn't matter, right? And it's there. And if it's,
The emerging stack is the Park stack, right? So PyTorch, open source AI, open weights AI model, Ray, and Kubernetes, right? So Park.
Right.
So it's like the lamp stack for AI. So this is the stack that people are building the AI platform. So in principle, you can run the Park stack on Ubicloud.
Right, you can, and it's already this managed.
Because Kubernetes is one of your strong suites already, right?
Yes.
So
exactly, Kubernetes is there, and then for persistence, you store, for your app, you store it on Postgres. For object store, you typically use R2, in the most common case. Again, we have an internal store, which we dedicate to larger customers. We can provision, a dedicated instance, like to them. So that's an option. But practically, that's and then all of this stack, costs you about 60-70% less. So that's a substance. It's not like you wouldn't do this for 10%, like cost savings, right? But when you're cutting your bill, like 3x, now it becomes interesting for quite a few customers. And then you also know, like you're not, so you're getting your money's worth, but then you're not beholden to us. So if, let's say, you didn't like it for whatever reason, you can take your stuff and go elsewhere, right? And it's the same stack. Like there isn't any, Ubicloud gotcha that keeps you,
what's your, if you're comfortable, what's, at a high level, what's the geographic profile of your users, US versus non-US?
Yeah, maybe I would say then about 40% US, maybe about 45% Europe.
And that's key because Europe is, like we said earlier, is making a lot of noise about of not being too locked into the hyperscalers.
Right. And so at this point, majority is Europe for us, but very kind of close, if you will. And then there's the rest of the world. We got customers from like Asia and other parts of the world as well. But that's the biggest concentration. Yeah. And then we have a team that's so Özgün is based out of Amsterdam. I'm here. Daniel, our co-founder, is here. Our team is spread across. We have folks in Amsterdam. We got folks here in Silicon Valley. We got folks in Istanbul. We got folks in Germany. We got it's spread out, and the customer base kind of reflects that as well.
So what are the next 2 to 3 Lego blocks you need that are on your roadmap that you think will make a big impact?
So one, on the AI side, then we, much like we are, keen on open source cloud as a whole, we're keen on open source AI. And that goes into open weight models very much so. And providing them,
Park Stack, you should run the Park Stack. PyTorch, AI open weights models, Ray, Kubernetes. Just package it out of the box. And then pick and choose your open weights model.
Which makes perfect sense. And yes, so like this would very much kind of fall in that direction. And then from a, like what's the kind of like additional edge? Hey, like if you want to run your, inference or your like other workloads wherever you are, and in that case you're often an enterprise more so than if you care that much about, for example, running it in a sovereign country, like you want to run you want your data to stay in the Netherlands, for example, right? Or you want that, then basically the GPU is there, then Ubicloud stack is running there, everything will remain there. So that full not only is the model open source, but going back to the top of our conversation, all the the actions around it are open source. So when you send something to that inference endpoint, it's not getting trained on by somebody else, or it's not like you basically you own your data, you own the inference stack, and it very much acts like what you expect from a cloud convenience. You're not hand rolling the LLM on some kind of GPU bare metal and trying optimizing its throughput, etc.
Which by the way, so there's the Park Stack, but then there's the open source inference tools, VLLM, SGLang.
Yes.
Those kinds of things need to be. So this Lego block around AI, is this something that your actual users and customers are asking for?
Yes. So in fact, already in the Ubicloud, pane, if you log in, you'll see like an AI inference section where you can get some of the, like the DeepSeek and Qwen open like models, like inference that way, and then others, we can basically pass them on to like Open Router and have you.
So the what you're trying to get to now is if I want to build my own an AI platform on top of Ubicloud to make that easy.
Exactly. So when you come to Ubicloud, that you're like getting, and if you that you can get all of that done, and if you need a database for your AI app, which you probably do, then default to Postgres, and you get like our partnership. Postgres itself is already very robust, and then partnership together with ClickHouse, all the improvements that we make there will be immediately available. So then you're getting smaller databases that you can spin up and down very easily. So these could power your agents. If you wanted to, you need compute to run like your AI agents need compute. Instead of paying $80 a month on it on AWS, you can pay $30 a month, or of course this is billed like per minute as opposed to per month. So you just have a much more compelling kind of cost structure to build these kind of like AI environments on top of Ubicloud.
So by the way, so does Ubicloud feel like a regular cloud? So you've got things like serverless.
It does feel like a regular cloud. It doesn't have everything that a regular cloud has. So so it like be done one at a time. Serverless is one of those things where like we don't have a Ubicloud Lambda, or whatever you call it, yet. The GitHub Actions product acts kind of similar, right? Like you can spin up instances and spin them down, but
is this Lambda-like thing one of the Lego blocks you want?
Yes, it is one of the Lego blocks. It's one of the dozen or so services. When I look at, say, okay, and I say it's a non-goal to not build the others, but it's a goal to build exactly like a serverless component. Like we wouldn't build a managed Cassandra offering, for example, right? Like that would be a long tail, but we would very much have a like a serverless component that runs on Ubicloud. Yes. Right now it's not. Right now it's vanilla VMs that you provide or Kubernetes that you use.
So if I go to Ubicloud and I don't know, there's half a dozen open source projects I want to run. I'm just making this up, Kafka, something like that, right? So if I go on one of the hyperscalers, they have managed versions of that. Not saying they're the best, but they exist, or they're startups who will do that for me. So what's the situation for popular open source projects on Ubicloud?
Yeah, so you've got there's two aspects of it. One, first party, we have again managed Postgres, managed Kubernetes as of like today, right? And then you've got like VMs, and you've got inference with VLLM managed and hosted and so forth. Now, for example, if you wanted to do something specific, let's say take a Kafka as an example, right? There is two ways for us to do it. One, we built it ourselves. The same control plane logic applies to providing those services.
That's a big undertaking.
That's a big undertaking, right? Or B, we have the
or work with IBM that bought Confluent.
Yes, I want. Okay, yes, yeah. IBM is the new owner. That's right. But yes, work with that team to have them build, because we offer the primitives. Because as a cloud provider, what do they need? They need compute, right? They need storage. They need the private networking primitives to make this kind of contain. We provide all of those things. So then they build a managed kind of Kafka service, which now all of a sudden becomes available anywhere, right? So now the name Ubicloud comes from like it being ubiquitous, like ubiquitous cloud. So that, hey, if Ubicloud can run anywhere, and I built this managed Kafka to run on it, then my Kafka can run anywhere, right? So that's a platform play that'll, I think, take its life over the course of years, right? As opposed to, hey, tomorrow now we have a managed Kafka solution, but we basically partner with the open source ecosystem, much like you're doing with ClickHouse and otherwise, to build those services and make them available on ClickHouse, but on Ubicloud. But it's very explicitly the menu will be more narrow, clearly, than what an AWS has, right? Like if you're like you go to like a Walmart and you have all the SKUs. Like Ubicloud is more like the Trader Joe's, right? Like it's more compact, it's more curated. Everything is great value, great price. So you're a happy customer, but you're not coming in for the broadest menu.
So I don't know if you follow the Sky Computing Lab in Berkeley, but
I do.
So the original vision was basically all these cloud hyperscalers become almost like an abstraction, right? So you wanna do run something. Well, then you'll kick off a job, and then there's some abstraction which decides which of these hyperscalers
Yeah.
is best suited for this, and I'll run that job, and then you're done. And then
I
the next time you run the job, maybe a month later, oh, it's hyperscaler B is now better
Right,
suited for
right.
this type of job, right? So,
Yeah, I love that. Not just because of the idea, but it very much aligns with that philosophy. So I want Ubicloud to be used not because we built artificial, barriers around it, as some of the players have, but because it is the best value you can get. So like the Costco of the cloud, right?
well,
Like if
but the reason I bring it up is because you run on bare metal, presumably you can kind of play this role, right? So I'm interfacing with Ubicloud, but underneath Ubicloud may be using who knows,
Yes, yes,
right?
and I mean, yeah, and today we don't do it kind of like geographically. So in each kind of continent, we have a different provider at that, but it's all abstracted as kind of like Ubicloud. But we don't, like we'll tell you, we're not, like which provider that is that you're getting, and then what data center it runs and so forth. But fundamentally, yes, we are kind of able to aggregate that infrastructure in a public cloud fashion, right? And my belief and our conviction is if we do our job right, which is we focus on few services, we make them as reliable and as low cost as possible, the demand for those products are there. Everybody needs compute. And that doesn't automatically make Ubicloud a winner because there's a lot of switching costs and other things, but there is a minimal set of things that we do, which we already are seeing. Like there are companies that run all of the services I mentioned. They run Kubernetes for their apps, they back it by Postgres, and then they run our GitHub Actions runners to run their CI. So they like use kind of all of it. And while like as we build, like imagine adding a few more components to it, like serverless, and then how those things fit together. We have very, by the way, robust set of APIs to make this all kind of programmable, if you will. So this is then we are in the best position too, because like we're not going for hey, we make 70% gross margins on the like this, even the smallest SKU, and then 95% gross margin on our networking, and we're a public company that's multiple trillion there. Like any change in prices, like we don't have any of that. That's both an asset and also liability from our point of view. And for us, because we have this advantage of, okay, we got 500 amazing customers, we had only about 50 a year ago, right? So like that, it's growing rapidly. People they like what they're seeing. The burden is on us to kind of like keep building, and so that's how I look at it. And then like AI is helping disaggregate the cloud providers. That's not a Ubicloud it's a phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon, right? I think open source is only going to become more important. I think philosophically we spoke about open cloud, but open AI, not the company, but truly open source AI,
Yeah.
right? In a very decentralized way, where it's not just aggregated by Anthropic and OpenAI and a few closed source large models, but the state of the art open source models need a place to run. They need compute. And they need databases to run, and like we're not gonna be the only place that's done. Clearly, the market is too large for that. But we, like a very transparent, ethical and high value company. That's our goal to build with Ubicloud.
So in closing, for listeners who are open cloud and Ubicloud curious, what are there meetups? Are there webinars? Or what do they
Yeah,
do? Do they
yeah.
just go to the documentation or?
The best thing to do would be, so of course we have our like Ubicloud on X, like Ubicloud HQ that you can go follow. But most practical is I'd go to ubicloud.com and then like signing up is free.
Are there free credits?
There are free credits. There is by default free credits. I think that's about 1,250 minutes a month. But I am very happy to, if they email us with like mentioning this podcast, we'll add 250,000, free minutes. So that's plenty to do a lot of tests. Basically, that's like months of compute, basically, that you can run. You can use those credits on Postgres or on any of these services, GitHub Actions, Kubernetes, AI, and so forth, and then see for yourself, like at zero cost, at zero risk. And at that point, you're not moving production workloads, probably. You're just seeing, okay, is this thing real? And then, of course, our documentation is all there. Our code is all out there. I think recently, not about a few months ago, Grok, the AI Grok, not the chip manufacturing company, but recommended us when somebody said, okay, what's an open source alternative to AWS? Somebody asked, and then somebody retweeted. All of a sudden, like we're just sitting doing kind of our daily work, and then we've got like more than like a couple thousand signups to do this. So it's like, what's happening? So that like there's we see the message resonate, and so the best thing that I can ask for is usage and feedback. Right, like we, when you kind of go in, you try our Postgres, try our VMs. If you like what you see, that's great. If you don't like what you see, tell us. I'm Umur at Ubicloud. I read all messages directly or just email kind of support, and we'll be on it. And we're building it kind of together, kind of in the open. And further collaboration you could even contribute code, right? But that's obviously an escalation, down the road. But that's what I would say. Just sign up. You go to ubicloud.com, sign up, email us at support@ubicloud, or me personally, and then we'll add 250K in credits of minutes of credits, and stay in touch.
And with that, thank you, Umur.
Awesome. Thanks, man.